I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're exploring how profound loss can awaken purpose with a terrific author. His name is Mitch Bakker, and he has penned a powerful book. It is called Resolve, a journey weighted by grief, disrupted by truth, and awakened to purpose. After the loss of both his parents, Mitch found himself at a crossroads, wrestling with the fragility of life and the urgency to live with meaning. Resolve is a deeply moving blend of personal stories, modern day parables, and biblical reflection that invites readers to transform grief into growth and faith into action. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. And be sure to download the Spotlight Network TV app streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. Mitch, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thanks for having me.
It is such a profound part of our lives when we lose our parents.
Mm,
It's so devastating. Unfortunately, you'd have to live through it to understand it. You have lived through it. I've lived through it. Yours motivated you to write this book and rethink your life a little bit. Tell us a little bit about how that served as an emotional catalyst to write Resolve.
yeah, really, it happened when I was sitting by the bedside of my mother, and it was the day that she had passed. And that's a time, of reflection.
Yeah.
And I started to reflect about my father who had passed away 25 years earlier. And then I realized that my mother, who was fighting for her last breath, was 25 years older than me. And so
Mm,
I was kind of in this middle space, this 25, you're looking back 25 years, looking forward 25 years, realizing that the next 25 years was going to go a lot quicker.
yeah.
And and then I also happened to, my birthday was that week, and I turned 57, which was the year that my father passed away. He
Mm,
died at 57. So it was a lot of like reflections, and I kind of was like, when my mom passed, I was filled with this kind of sense of urgency, um, wanting to do something, and wasn't really even sure what I wanted to do. It ended up being this book, Resolve.
mm.
Um, but when you're in that space of feeling like your life is winding down, um, it kind of puts you in a different framework. And so, that's kind of how I got to the place of, beginning to write, and then it just kind of flowed out for me and, turned into the book Resolve.
Talk to us about the word resolve, what it means to you in the context of this book.
Yeah, well, it's my attempt to resolve my life and my faith journey.
Mhm.
Um, it could also be unresolved because, obviously I don't have everything resolved.
Right.
But that's kind of where it came from. And I think one of the things that I had to resolve first, even before I felt like I had permission to write the book, which sounds
Mhm.
a little strange, but I came across in my devotional journey, I came across a verse in, well, really a passage in Luke 11.
Mhm.
And it was kind of towards the end of the chapter where Jesus is invited by a Pharisee to have dinner with him. And
Mhm.
Jesus accepts the invitation. And as they walk into the establishment, the Pharisee goes to the washing bowl and washes his hands, but Jesus reclines at the table. And it really bothered the Pharisee that he didn't wash his hands because it was a ceremonial washing, it wasn't hygiene.
Mhm.
So he comes back to the table, and Jesus calls him out and says, you Pharisees are unbelievable because all you care about is your appearance on the outside. And he says, I can see him like looking at his chest saying, but inside you're wicked and greedy.
Yeah.
Don't you understand that the Father who made the outside made the inside also? And then I imagine there being a pause. And then the next verse, which is verse 41, really changed my life.
Mm,
Because what he says is, um, you know, God made the outside and the inside. And if you want to be clean inside, give generously to the poor, and all will be clean for you.
mm,
And I looked at that and I thought, huh, how is that possible? How can you give your way into cleanliness?
mm,
Um, but really, I was kind of feeling like I didn't really have permission to do something like write a book because of my own personal failures.
mm,
But when I started to take that verse seriously and started to be more generous, not just generous with money, but generous with my time, instead of looking for ways to say no, I started looking for ways to say yes.
mhm,
And it led me into the prison. I've been in there 7 years now, teaching classes, a mentoring relationship that I have with this young man, um, and giving in ways that we hadn't done before, that my wife and I hadn't done before. And what it did for me is started to unlock some things for me and started to make me realize that I don't need to be righteous to write a book,
mm,
but I need to be covered in the one that is righteous. And I started to feel a righteousness that wasn't my own. I started to feel like, oh, I have permission to write this book. Because people aren't reading the book to see how good I am. They're reading the book to see how a broken man has found Christ, the righteous one.
mm.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense, absolutely. Their journey is not your journey is not their journey, but they will find
Right.
commonalities and they might find their own purpose in seeking and reading about how you found your purpose. Talk to us a little bit about working with men in prison. Obviously, this is a community that most people in society have completely written off. They've, just absolutely have out of their mind and lock them away, throw away the key. But you chose to work with these people that many people consider beyond saving, beyond redemption. Um, Tell us how you chose that community and what the work has been like, how you've benefited their lives, and how you feel it's impacted your life.
Yeah, I was invited. Our pastor invited a bunch of people from the neighborhood. Pastor lives in our neighborhood, and I was sitting at the kitchen, and there was a gentleman next to me, and he was telling me a bit about his ministry within the prisons.
Mhm,
And what had happened with him is his mother and father were killed instantly by this woman who ran a traffic light who was also high. So she went to prison, and part of his therapy, obviously he was devastated, but part of his therapy was to let this woman know that he had forgiven her.
mm,
And he went into the prison and let her know that. But during that process, he discovered Prison Fellowship, which was founded by Chuck Colson. And he said it changed. He said to me, he goes, it really changed my life. And he invited me to come in and audit his class. It took me a while to accept that invitation.
yeah.
Um, but then I finally did. And when I went in, I met three men who kind of shared their testimony with me and three incarcerated men.
Mhm,
And I was walking out into my car from the parking lot and thinking, I was trying to think when I was in the presence of three more spiritual men,
mm,
and I couldn't think of a time in my life. That's how impactful those conversations were for me. And from that point, I started to just say, well, what do I need to do to join this ministry? And I did a speaker of the month, and that was with an auditorium full of prisoners, and that was kind of like my first step. And then I started signing up for classes, teaching classes, facilitating classes. And what I found with these men is, obviously they've lost everything. They've lost their reputations. Many of them have lost, their any finances that they did have. So they're sitting in prison with nothing.
Yeah.
And yet there's this love for Christ that many of them have, and which causes me to ask myself, maybe I could love Jesus with nothing too.
Hmm.
It's not the things that we have that bring us happiness. It's more deep than that for sure.
Absolutely. What do you hope readers take away from your book? What do you hope changes in their lives once they've looked at your
Mm.
journey?
I would hope um, that it would give them a sense of hope. Like I have tried to be honest, as honest as I can be about, my own personal failings, things that have happened to me, through either grief. I lost my nephew. He was only 13. That was a devastating time. I went through a job loss that was very difficult for me. Um, I'm honest with, you know, grief and failures. And the intention is behind that is that I can relate to people that have losses in their lives as well. Um, which is why the book has been very popular within the prisons.
Hmm.
Um, I think after next month, we'll have distributed 10,000 books
Wow.
across the country in different prisons. And I've actually facilitated a couple of classes of Resolve with prisoners now.
Hmm.
And the prisoners can relate to the book, and it gives them a sense of hope as well. Um, yeah, I would say that, more than anything, I think people can relate to a lot of the stories that I have.
Hmm.
Um, and it was difficult for me to write these stories initially, but like I said earlier, um, I felt like I had permission to write this book,
Yeah.
where I didn't feel like I had that before that experience, both with my mother passing and the Luke 11:41.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you working on anything new right now?
Yeah, actually, I am. I finished my second book. It's called Drawn. Here's a copy of it.
Hmm.
Um, and Drawn, actually, it's gone live. It's going live today on Amazon.
Great.
It's a devotional. It's different than Resolve. Resolve is more of a memoir, where this is short stories. There's 40 of them. Um, and the intent behind Drawn is really to encourage the reader to find God in all their moments
Hmm.
and look for God in the margins of their story, because God's in all of our moments. He's in all of our stories.
Hmm.
And I think back to, the Old Testament and how people would build monuments to remember, incidences where God, came in and performed miracles in their lives.
Hmm.
I feel like that's what we're kind of called to do too. In today's day and age, it's more of storytelling.
Yeah.
Jesus told stories. He only spoke in parables, which is short stories.
Hmm.
So stories are very powerful, and they can awaken us to God's working in our lives. And so this book is really about trying to wake people up to the fact that God's in all our moments.
Yeah.
And when you journal and you write about these things that He's done, even if you're not aware of it when you're going through things, you look back and you say, "Oh, I can see how God was in that."
Yeah.
It's very powerful.
Wonderful. We will look for that book. It is called Drawn. The book we've been focusing on primarily today is called Resolve, a journey weighted by grief, disrupted by truth, and awakened to purpose. A powerful reminder that in the shadow of loss, faith can illuminate a new path forward. Mitch, thanks so much for joining me here today on Spotlight.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time, your wisdom, and your insight. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time until next time on Spotlight.